Hi, virtual students. We're here with Unit 3, Part 2, and we're starting down here on this part of your notes. So anyway, we're going to get rolling here. We're starting you out with our daily blog. You're going to answer that real quick. Take a quick second. And um, anyway, the reason I'm asking you this is, again, hopefully some of these are kind of obvious to us, what goes into how much money you're going to earn someday, especially the talent, personal motivation part, educational talent. Those are kind of obvious, but we've got some things, that also play a role, at least statistically, in a lot of people's lives, and we see some gaps, okay, in average wages between people of different races, people of different genders, and also the last one that makes a pretty significant influence on how much we earn is how much your money made, how much money your parents make. So we'll kind of look at some stats on that today as we kind of get going here. Okay, I want you to answer these true or false. Okay, you got 6 questions there. Go ahead and take a quick second and answer those questions. Okay, so I think that if the world was perfect, if the United States in this case was perfect, we would probably say true to one, two, I would say true to 1 and 2, right? That's what we want to say. We probably want to say false to number 3. Again, if we're in a perfect world, we want to say false to number 4, right? It's kind of up to you what you want to say about number 5, if you think the government should get involved or anything like that. And number 6, we want, like I said, if we want it to be perfect, we would say probably true for number 6. But again, these are opinion questions, right? That's kind of how you perceive your potential opportunities, and different people are going to answer different ways. So let's get started here. The first stat that we're going to look at is has to do with income mobility, okay? And this idea of what this chart is showing is they divided the population up into even sections of 20%. So they put the richest 20% in a bracket, so to speak. They call them quintiles. The next 20%, 20%, all the way down to the bottom. And so this chart is showing us that these people started at the top. They had about a 40% chance of staying at the top. 23% of them went down to the next 20%, et cetera, et cetera. About 8% of them or so started at the top but ended down at the bottom. You can see kind of starting in the middle is pretty even. It's kind of a coin flip. There's not necessarily any really, really, really significant statistics like we see with the rich staying rich. We see the opposite with the poor staying poor down here, right? If I start at the bottom, I've got over a 40% chance of staying at the bottom. Not impossible to get to the top, but a little bit, but still, obviously not necessarily very likely. And so, anyway, just some stats there. They took this to the next level and they looked at the top group, so this group, and then the left side is going to be this group, and they looked at how many of those people went to college. Well, what they found was that from the top group, 53% of kids finished college, okay, as opposed to only 11% of the bottom group went to college. And you can kind of see, we talk about this motivation thing, and, motivation comes from a few different places. It can come from, yourself. It can come from your parents. It can come from your school corporation. It can come from your friends and your peers, and people that start out at the bottom, whose parents probably especially have not necessarily been educated in a lot of cases, they're not going to get that motivational factor from that avenue, right? And so whatever's motivating kids to do these things, and again, if I'm a parent and I went to college, I'm going to encourage my kids to go to college much more likely than the people whose parents have not gone to college, right? And so we kind of see if I go to college as starting out in the richest group, I'm very likely to stay there. If I don't go to college in the poorest group, I'm very likely to stay there. If I do the opposite of kind of what the majority does in each group, it kind of becomes the equalizer, right? We kind of see the equalizer of now we're going to figure out who's good at their job and things like that. So just kind of some trends. I don't know a way to fix it necessarily, just kind of showing you that these are some things that do exist. The other gap in wages comes from men versus women, and minorities versus whites. And so some of this is caused by discrimination. Maybe a lot of it caused by discrimination. I can't necessarily speak from knowing for sure. I haven't done any studies on it necessarily, but what we'll see here as we kind of move forward is there are some trends that are somewhat alarming. Okay, but we can refer to it as the wage gap, and we'll kind of see these stats as we go forward here. The first significant one, I'm just going to put myself right in the middle here so you can kind of see the chart full, is men versus women. Okay, and so this column here is showing the percentage of money women make, right, in relationship to men based on different occupations. Overall, it's only about 82%. Okay, and so anyway, I was kind of thinking about like what causes this, and it's kind of interesting that like the jobs that require a lot of physical activity are actually the closest to equal to men, right? We would probably take the original stereotype of saying that women can't do everything physical that a man can do, or not as much as they can do, and kind of say, well, maybe that's one of the reasons. Well, this kind of uh, makes that not true, right? Now, on the flip side, we'd say, hey, where women use their brain, that's where they're going to be as good or better than men, and we kind of see that down here. That's not the case, right? So, like legal fees or legal jobs, they don't show us that. So I think that what we need to realize is that discrimination doesn't necessarily come from employers, right? Like in a business setting, it comes from like individuals that hire these people to do things, right? And so the people that would rather have a man lawyer than a female lawyer, that's where that discrimination is probably happening, where we really don't even necessarily realize it sometimes, and that's super super difficult to identify and fix. And so it's just kind of a little bit of a different way of looking at things as we kind of see some of these statistics. All right, the other chart that we'll see here is going to look at different races. And so if you just look at these numbers that I'm going to circle here, these are whites, these are blacks, Asians, and Hispanics. Those are their average salaries per week. Okay, and we talk about if there's one way to look at things, like we want to be better than our parents. Okay, and that can mean a little bit better, sometimes a lot better, and you kind of start thinking about some of the situations, especially African Americans have faced in the United States over the course of our history. Right, obviously slavery didn't end until 1863. Well, remember, if my goal is to be better than my parents, it doesn't necessarily take too much economically to be better than my parents if they were slaves, right? And on top of that, too, African Americans have not had the access to education throughout the course of the history of the United States as much as whites have, right? And so you can kind of see, or I don't want to, the word is you can kind of explain some of that. I'm not justifying it. I'm explaining it. Um, and same with like Hispanics. A lot of Hispanics are first or second generation moving into the United States, where they're coming from a bad economic situation. It doesn't necessarily take a ton to want to be able to be better than their parents, and so it's a long road to success, right? Sometimes it takes a long time to do some of those things. On the Asian side of things, think about Asians that are able to move to the United States. They have to have money in the first place to be able to afford to move here. It's a long trip, right? It's an expensive trip. And so we have experienced um, and talented Asians that are moving here, right? They're not the ones that are going to be unsuccessful. They're already successful, and they pass a lot of those traits on to their children. Um, we also see some disparity in college education levels, and so if we look at these numbers here, these are whites college graduates percentages, blacks college graduate percentages, Asians college graduate percentages, and then Hispanics, right? So some of those numbers kind of line up. But again, as I kind of said before, access to education has not necessarily always been, and maybe it still isn't as readily available for especially minorities, right? And so it's a difficult situation. But it is some ways that we can kind of explain it and see some of the things that we need to fix as a country, right? As we analyze some of these stats. All right, just real quick, write down something you know about labor unions. We're going to talk about them here in a sec. All right, the last thing that influences how much money you may earn are labor unions. And these are groups of workers that basically have similar jobs, okay, that eventually are going to um, kind of come together and say, hey, listen, let's protect our trade, let's protect our job, and ask for some benefits, whether it's higher pay, safer workplaces, those types of things, to be able to again gain advantages. In the early stages, things were significantly different. Again, most of the laws have already been created, and what union membership has kind of morphed into is really just negotiating wages from year to year, negotiating contracts. We can call that collective bargaining. And so basically, a small group of people in a union are going to argue for the entirety of the the company, for example. Okay, so we're going to have so every teacher in our school has the same contract. Okay, and and that contract includes how many years experience you have and how much how much and how much of an education you have. So if you have a master's degree, how much money you're going to earn. So everybody's under this same contract. There's good and bad to it, right? The bad thing is in unions that if the bad teachers, for example, they make just as much money as the good teachers, right? The good teachers don't make as much money as maybe they should. The good thing is that teachers can't get taken advantage of by the administration saying, hey, listen, as a teacher, like, hey, listen, there's only like 8 kids in your class. We're not going to pay you that much money. And so there is some safety net to it as well. There's 3 stages. Stage one is we're going to negotiate just one on one. Stage two would be like where we hire a lawyer and our lawyers are going to argue. Stage three is going to be a situation where we hire what is called an arbitrator. Think of it as a judge where now we present our argument and then we're going to see what the judge decides. One way for unions to gain some attention is going on strike, refusing to work. Obviously, if they're not working, the company's not bringing in money, and it puts some pressure on administration. For example, it's happened recently that the Chicago Teachers Union's gone on strike. Well, the parents want the teachers to go back to work because now their kids are staying at home, right? And they don't want that. They want to go to work themselves. And so it does put some power into the strikers, so to speak, hands in certain cases. Sometimes the owners can lock out the workers too. This happens when a worker is going to make probably an extreme amount of money and it's the only way they can make money. And so like professional athletics is one of these examples because if I make $3 million as a professional football player, that's probably the most money I'm ever going to make, right? And so the owners kind of have some power to say, hey, listen, we're paying you plenty of money. If you think you can make more money somewhere else, go ahead and try. And so if the contracts get a little bit unbalanced, that's one thing that the owners can do, and they've done in the past. If a strike is going to put the economy of the United States in jeopardy, the government can make people go back to work. We call it an injunction. And again, these unions are pretty smart. They kind of know what they're doing. For example, the coal miners went on strike in the middle of the winter time back in the 40s or 50s. And those coal miners were made to go back to work because if we can't heat our homes, we're going to have a whole nother problem, where it gets cold at in the United States. So the government can prevent some of these things for a certain period of time if they find it necessary. Overall, unions aren't quite as popular as they used to be, but they do play a role still in our day-to-day lives, depending on what job you do. Really, to be honest, a lot of jobs have become extremely specialized. Um, it's not as unions really became popular in the 50s and 60s when people were like the car manufacturing and truck drivers and things like that, where You could get replaced pretty fast because I can train you pretty fast to work on an assembly line. I can train you pretty fast to drive a truck, those types of things. And we've kind of seen, obviously, I mean, we've seen way, way, way different types of specialization of jobs. So it's not as popular as it used to be for people to be. Okay, that's what I've got for you today. Email me with questions. We'll talk soon.